Number 10, Hindsight Lad. If you ever wondered what would happen if a toxic Reddit moderator got lost in a spandex warehouse, meet Carlton LaFrog. Carlton is the guy who looks at a burning building and tells the firefighters they're holding the hose at a statistically inefficient angle. He has zero powers unless you count being a monumental buzzkill as a genetic mutation. He essentially blackmailed his way onto the New Warriors because he figured out Speedball's secret identity and threatened to leak it. This basically starts off his speedrun of being one of the most annoying heroes in all of Marvel, because while most heroes earn their spot by stopping bank robberies, Carlton got his by being a neighborhood snitch with a hobby for extortion. He then bought a costume and started calling himself Hindsight Lad, which is honestly one of the most punchable names in comic book history. He spent his time sitting on the sidelines pointing out everything his teammates did wrong after the fact. He was already annoying at first, but then the Stamford tragedy happened, where an explosion unalived multiple school kids. This event kicked off the Civil War when the New Warriors were blamed for the massive explosion. Instead of being a loyal friend, Carlton went full villain in the most pathetic way possible. He created a website dedicated to ruining the lives of his former friends. He put their real names and addresses online, which led to their families being attacked by angry mobs. He sat safely behind his monitor while innocent people suffered because of his desperate need for clout. Fans despise him because he's a realistic coward who uses intimate secrets as weapons. He acts as a moral judge while being the most untrustworthy person in the room. For me, there's nothing heroic about a guy who trades the safety of his friends for a few clicks and a sense of smug superiority. I guess his only real superpower was making everyone wish they had his hindsight to never meet him. If you think this guy was already annoying, then buckle up because we're just getting started. Number 9, Onslaught. Imagine a sentient armored tank made of pure ego and bad editorial decisions, and you have Onslaught. This guy was born because Professor X finally lost his cool and tried to lobotomize Magneto with a psychic hammer. A bit of Magneto's dark energy leaked into Xavier's brain, and they merged to form a giant purple angry cloud of psionic power. One of the things that I first noticed is that Onslaught looked like he was designed by a teenager who thought more spikes meant more personality. Also, he was nearly godlike entity that could rewrite reality and bend metal. But his real power was making readers buy 50 different comics just to understand why he was shouting. He arrived during the peak of the 90s, an era when Marvel thought the best way to tell a story was to make it as confusing and loud as possible. The Onslaught saga was a massive mess that touched every single book on the shelves. Fans didn't just hate him because he was a bad guy, but also because he was a giant walking commercial for a reboot nobody asked for. Marvel used him as a glorified garbage disposal to get rid of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. At the end of his big fight, all the major non-mutant heroes had to sacrifice themselves to stop him. This led to the Heroes Reborn era, which was basically a weird alternate universe where everyone had giant muscles and no common sense. Onslaught wasn't a character as much as he was a corporate mandate in a cape. If that's not terrible enough, his power levels were completely inconsistent, changing whenever the plot needed him to survive another issue. He would be invincible one minute and then get punched out the next. But the worst of all is that he turned the X-Men's core conflict into a boring slugfest that lasted way too long. This is where we felt like we were being punished for following the story, as the conclusion just wiped away decades of history for a cheap gimmick. He is the physical manifestation of a to-be-continued cliffhanger that leads to a dead end. For a villain so overpowered, it's crazy to think that his most devastating attack was actually his ability to lower the trade-in value of your comic collection. Number 8, the High Evolutionary. Herbert Wyndham is the kind of guy who would kidnap your dog just to see if he could give it thumbs and a degree in philosophy. This guy started out as a human scientist, but eventually decided that natural evolution was moving too slow for his liking. That's when he built himself a suit of silver armor that makes him basically a god and set up shop on Wondergore Mountain to play with DNA. He isn't trying to take over the world in the usual way, he just thinks every living thing is a rough draft that needs his heavy-handed editing. His success started when he created a race of animal people called New Men, and even made his own version of Earth called the Counter-Earth. This might be a great achievement, but the reason fans find him absolutely repulsive is because he has the emotional range of a laboratory fridge. He treats sentient beings like science fair projects. If he thinks a species is an evolutionary dead end, he has no problem trying to delete the entire planet. Not only that, he's been involved in some of the most frustrating retcons in Marvel history, especially regarding Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. He's spent years messing with their origins, revealing he experimented on them when they were babies. He also views the most powerful heroes in the universe as broken toys that he needs to take apart. That's when I think that there is a specific kind of cold, calculated cruelty to his actions that make him harder to like than a traditional villain. He doesn't have a tragic backstory or a relatable motive. He just has a massive ego and a petri dish. He has literally turned heroes into puddles of goo just to prove a point about biology. What makes it even more annoying is his constant monologuing about the greater good of science while he performs horrific experiments on people who are still conscious. He acts like a benevolent teacher while behaving like a deranged butcher. We readers find his smug, detached attitude infuriating because he never feels bad about the lives he ruins. He is essentially a cosmic snob who thinks his intelligence gives him a license to be a monster, and that's exactly why he made it on this list. Number 7. Sins Past Gwen Stacy. Sometimes a character is so beloved that a single bad story could turn their entire legacy into a radioactive crater. Gwen Stacy was originally the gold standard for superhero love interests, the sweet and bright woman whose death defined Superman's journey. For decades, she was the symbol of Peter Parker's lost innocence. Then, the Sins Past storyline arrived and decided to set that entire legacy on fire for absolutely no reason. The writers revealed that before she died, Gwen had a secret affair with Norman Osborn, the guy who eventually murdered her. Not only did she sleep with her boyfriend's worst enemy, but she also had secret twins in Europe who aged at double speed because of Norman's goblin blood. We fans were absolutely disgusted by this change. It took a character who was defined by her loyalty and goodness and turned her into someone who was hiding a gross secret from Peter. The thing about all this is that it didn't make any sense with her established personality or the timeline of the original comics. It felt like the writers were trying to be edgier by dragging a dead character through the mud, because the idea of Gwen Stacy falling for a creepy older businessman who was also a known psychopath was a bridge too far for almost every reader, as it turned her tragic death into a weird soap opera mess. This version of Gwen isn't hated because she's a villain, but because the story felt like a betrayal of the fans' trust. I'm calling it character assassination in the most literal sense. On top of that, it made Norman Osborn look like an even more cartoonish creep than he already was. The backlash was so intense that Marvel eventually had to spend years trying to fix the damage with even more complicated retcons. For a long time, the mere mention of the story was enough to start an argument that any comic forum on Reddit. It remains the ultimate example of how to ruin a perfect ending by adding a middle chapter that nobody wanted to read. At this point, it's safe to say that it takes a special kind of writing talent to make a bridge toss look like a second worst thing to happen to a person. Number 6, Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff is the fastest man alive, which unfortunately means he's also the fastest person to lose his temper. This dude is famous for being the most arrogant and irritable member of the Avengers, mostly because he thinks everyone else is moving in slow motion. While being a bit of a jerk is part of his charm for some, he eventually crossed the line into being genuinely toxic. First off, his overprotective attitude toward his sister Wanda often feels more like a hostage situation than sibling love. But the real wave of hatred started during the House of M event, where Wanda famously said, "No more mutants." While everyone blamed Wanda for warping reality, it was actually Pietro who whispered in her ear and pushed her to do it. He basically manipulated his sister's mental breakdown just so he could live in a world where mutants were in charge. He didn't care about the consequences, he just wanted to be a prince. When the world went back to normal, most mutants lost their powers. Pietro didn't try to make things right. Instead, he went on a crime spree, stealing sacred Terrigen mists from the Inhumans. He then started forcibly repowering mutants with the mists, which ended up killing many of them because of the process was toxic. What makes him even more unlikable is that he never takes responsibility. He always has an excuse, and he always acts like he is the real victim of every situation. What's worse is that he treated his own wife and daughter like obstacles to his ego, even exposing his child to dangerous chemicals of Terrigen mist without permission. Fans find him exhausting because of his redemption arcs never last. He will save the world on Monday, then betray the team by Thursday because someone didn't say thank you fast enough. In the end, he is a narcissist with a speed habit who ruins everything he touches. His personality is as abrasive as a sandpaper suit, and his constant smugness makes readers want to actually see him run straight into a brick wall. If he could actually outrun his problems, he would probably be in a different galaxy by now. Number 5, Maria Hill. If you combined a high school principal with a top secret spy agency and a massive chip on her shoulder, you would get Maria Hill. This girl took over S.H.I.E.L.D. after Nick Fury went into hiding, and she immediately made it her mission to treat every superhero like a ticking time bomb. While Fury was a guy who understood that heroes were necessary, Hill is a bureaucrat who thinks the world would be better if everyone followed a very strict set of rules. I dislike her mainly because she is the personification of government overreach. During the Civil War event, she was the one ordering soldiers to hunt down Captain America. She didn't even wait for the law to be officially signed before she started trying to arrest people. Not only that, she treats the Avengers with utter contempt, despite the fact that they have saved the planet from alien invasions more times than she has filled out a form. What I think makes her even more unlikable is her total lack of accountability. She's constantly making massive, dangerous mistakes, and then acts like she is still the smartest person in the room. For example, she once created a secret prison called Pleasant Hill, where she used a cosmic cube to brainwash villains into being happy civilians. This was a massive human rights violation that obviously blew up in her face, yet she still acted like the heroes were the ones being difficult. At the end of the day, the girl is smug, condescending, and perpetually annoyed that people with capes are getting in the way of her paperwork. She doesn't have any powers, but her ability to be an annoying authority figure is second to none. She's so annoying that some readers view her as a constant roadblock to the fun parts of a comic book. Every time she shows up in a helicarrier, you know she's about to ruin a hero's day for no good reason. Knowing her, she might actually be the only person who can make an alien invasion feel like a secondary problem comparing to a meeting with HR. Number 4, Civil War Iron Man. Tony Stark is usually the cool billionaire with high-tech toys, but for a few years, he was basically the most hated man in the Marvel Universe. During the original Civil War storyline, Tony decided that he knew what was best for everyone and led the charge for superhero registration. While his argument about accountability made sense on paper, his methods were straight out of a villain's handbook. First off, he built a secret prison in the negative zone, a place that literally causes depression, and threw his former hero friends in there without a trial. Then he decided to start working with some of the worst villains in history. He hired villains like Bullseye and Venom to hunt down heroes who didn't want to sign his papers. The peak of his villainy is the Ragnarok incident. Tony helped create a cyborg clone of Thor that ended up unaliving a hero named Goliath. Instead of feeling guilty, Tony just shrugged it off as a necessary cost of his plan. If that's not bad enough, he also manipulated Peter Parker into revealing his secret identity on live television, which led to Aunt May getting shot and Peter's life being destroyed. If you were Peter here, what would you do to Tony for basically destroying your life? Write your thoughts down in the comments. During all these years, he was cold, calculated, and incredibly arrogant. Fans felt like the character they loved had been replaced by a fascist in a shiny suit. Even if you haven't read the comics and only know Tony from the movies, I'm pretty sure you would feel that way too. Because he stopped being a hero and became a corporate enforcer who was willing to ruin lives to win an argument. But the absolute worst thing is that the writers made him so unlikable that the only way to fix his reputation was to literally give him a brain reboot in a later story to erase his memory of those events. It was a desperate move to make him a good guy again, because the version of Tony that fought in the Civil War was completely irredeemable. Tony might be able to build a suit of armor that could withstand a nuclear blast, but I doubt it could protect him from a universal thumbs down from the readers. Number 3, Krakoan era beast. Hank McCoy used to be the bouncing blue poetry quoting heart of the X-Men, but lately he has become something much more sinister. In the modern era of the mutant nation Krakoa, Beast took over the Black Ops team known as X-Force and turned into a literal war criminal, arguably worse than Joseph Stalin. We hate him now because of his hypocrisy has reached legendary levels. He claims to be doing everything for the safety of his people, but he uses that excuse to commit atrocities. He essentially attacked and lobotomized the entire nation of Terra Verde just because he saw them as a competitor to mutant plant-based technology. On top of that, he treated his own teammates like disposable lab rats. For example, he killed Wolverine multiple times just to see how the resurrection process worked, and then tried to turn him into a mindless lobotomized weapon. What makes the fan hatred so intense is that this wasn't a sudden shift. It was a slow descent into being a self-righteous monster. He acts like his high IQ gives him a pass to ignore basic morality, to the point where he has become a patronizing egomaniac who sneers at anyone who dares to question his methods. He doesn't even think he's a villain, which makes him even more annoying to read. He views the world as a giant chess set where he is the only one smart enough to play. This is a tragic phase for some fans because the lovable scholar who once cared about coexistence is gone, replaced by a cold-hearted strategist who would sacrifice his best friend for a slightly better dataset. Readers have been begging for him to get what's coming to him because he has ruined the legacy of one of the original X-Men. He is a walking example of how being the smartest guy in the room can also make you the most dangerous person on the planet. I guess being a genius doesn't include the ability to realize that everyone around you wants to see you get drop-kicked. Number 2, the Sentry. Imagine if a fanfiction character with the power of a million suns was suddenly inserted into every major historical event in Marvel history. That's the Sentry, a hero who was retconned into existence in 2000. The story claimed he was everyone's best friend in the 1960s, but everyone just forgot about him. The first thing that makes us fans hate him is because he feels like a massive Mary Sue character who was forced into the spotlight. Also, he is so powerful that he breaks the logic of every story he's in. For instance, he once tore Ares the god of war in half like a piece of bread, which made every other hero look useless. His presence usually means the writers have run out of ideas and needs a deus ex machina to end the fight. If the villain's too strong, the Sentry just shows up and wins instantly. If the heroes need to struggle, the Sentry is conveniently having a mental breakdown in his room. This The Void alter ego he has was supposed to make him deep, but it usually just made him a repetitive plot device. That's not weird enough. He was once suddenly Peter Parker's mentor and the Hulk's best buddy, even though he hadn't existed in the comics for 40 years. This makes me think that it was disrespectful to the actual history of the Marvel Universe. He was a character designed to be the most important person ever, but he didn't earn any of that weight through actual storytelling. I found it boring because there was no tension when he was on the page. You either wanted for him to win everything or waited for him to cry and leave. He was ultimately a cosmic power fantasy that didn't fit the grounded world of the Avengers. Every time he solved a massive crisis with a single punch, it felt like a slap in the face to the characters who actually had to try. Sometimes I feel like he could save the entire world and still have everyone wishing he had just stayed in his room. As terrible as everyone is on this list, I don't think they could even compare to a rank topper. Number 1, Marcus Immortus. There are bad characters, and then there's Marcus Immortus, a character so vile that his existence is a permanent stain on Marvel's history. He appeared in the infamous Avengers number 200, a story that is universally regarded as the most offensive thing the company ever printed. Marcus is the son of a time traveler who lived in a dimension called Limbo. Because he was lonely, he decided to rebirth himself on Earth. To do this, he kidnapped Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, and used a mind control machine to make her fall in love with him. He then impregnated her with himself, sent her back to Earth, and was born as his own father. We hate him because this is, in every sense of the word, a story about cosmic rape and manipulation. Like, how do you justify this? But it doesn't stop there, because how the other Avengers reacted will make your blood pressure raise higher than Snoop Dogg. Instead of being horrified that their teammate was kidnapped and forced into a pregnancy, they were happy for her. In fact, they treated the whole thing like a beautiful romance. At the end of the issue, a brainwashed Carol actually leaves with her abuser to go back to Limbo, and the Avengers literally wave goodbye with smiles on their faces. It was a complete failure of basic human decency from the writers and the characters. This wasn't just a bad villain plot. It was a gross violation of a female character that was treated as a joke. My hatred for Marcus is absolute because he represents the most tone-deaf and disgusting era of comic book writing. He isn't a villain you love to hate, he's a character that should never have been created. It took years for later writers to even begin to fix the damage he did to Carol Danvers' character. He is the ultimate example of a story that fails on every possible level, from logic to morality. That's why if he has a million haters, then I am one of them. If he has one hater, that's me. If he has no hater, then I am no longer alive. That's it for this one. If you liked the video, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and ring the bell so you never miss a drop. Craving more stories from comics, movies, and beyond? Check out this video right here. Cheers and see you in the next one.